The house I spent my whole life dreaming about, it was never mine. My brother made sure of that. I used to think betrayal looked like screaming matches and broken dishes. Turns out, it can also wear a smile and call you sis. It started with a signature, just one. He said it was nothing. It's just a formality, Jules. You'll still own your part. He even laughed when I hesitated, like I was being dramatic. I wish I'd trusted my gut, but that's the thing. When someone spends a lifetime getting your trust, they don't have to steal it. You hand it to them. My name is Julia. I'm 33. I've never broken the law, never missed a payment, never asked anyone for anything I couldn't earn. After my divorce, I started rebuilding. Quietly, I picked up extra hours, said no to vacations, lived below my means. For 3 years, I saved every spare dollar. I had one goal: buy a home, something of my own, a place no one could take from me. Funny how life sets you up. Jake, my older brother, is the opposite of me in every way. Loud, charismatic, quick with a joke, and quicker with excuses. He's the kind of guy who could talk a cop out of a ticket with charm alone, and probably has. He's also the family favorite. The one Mom says has a good heart, even when he's maxed out her credit card. The one Dad still calls buddy, even after Jake missed his 3rd Father's Day in a row. Me, I'm the rock. The dependable one. The one who always shows up. That's exactly why he came to me. 6 months ago, he invited me to lunch. I remember because he never invites me to anything unless he needs something. The place was expensive, the kind of spot Jake couldn't afford unless someone else was footing the bill. Or he was about to pitch a big idea. He didn't waste time. I found this place, he said, leaning in like it was a secret. It's a fixer, but the location's killer. If I can get a loan, I can flip it in 6 months, tops. Double the value, but my credit's shot. I need you to co-sign just until I get approved. I stared at him. You want me to go into debt for a house you're flipping? He grinned. It's not just for me. Think about it. I fix it up. We both win. You're always saying you want to invest. This is your chance. I should have said no, but he kept talking, painting the picture, how we could rent it, how I could even move in once it's done, how it'd finally give us both a shot at something more. And when he smiled that smile, the one he's used since we were kids and I snuck him the last cookie, I felt that old tug again. Family, responsibility, guilt. So I signed. Not because I believed in the project. I believed in him. That was my first mistake. The second was thinking that signature meant anything. The loan went through in both our names. The house was put under an LLC, which Jake said was for tax reasons. I didn't understand the details. He brushed it off. You're on the deed. That's what matters. Every time I asked questions, he acted like I was accusing him of something. Don't you trust me? He said once. And that was enough to shut me up. The renovations began, and for a while things looked good. He sent photos, new floors, painted walls, a beautiful front porch with white railing and a swing, just like the kind I always dreamed of. For the first time in years, I felt like something was finally working out. My name was on something. I belonged somewhere. Then the photos stopped. The texts slowed. When I asked about timelines, he got vague. Just delays, he said. Supplies are back-ordered. When I asked for a copy of the updated title, he said he'd get to it. And when I pressed harder, when I said I wanted to come see it, he told me not to worry. It's all under control, Jules. Let me handle it. But the itch had started. that quiet little alarm in the back of my head. Something was wrong, so I drove out to the property myself. What I found hit me like a punch to the gut. There was a family living in the house, not renters, not contractors. A family, mom, dad, 2 kids playing in the yard. A for sale sign was shoved in the trash near the curb. My name wasn't anywhere on the mailbox, just his. When I knocked on the door, the man looked confused. "Are you the lady from the bank?" he asked. I shook my head. "I'm Julia," I said. This was supposed to be my house." He frowned. "We bought it last month. Jake said it was all his." I don't remember how I got back to my car, or how long I sat there. I do remember my hands were shaking too hard to start the engine. My brother had sold the house, without telling me, without my consent, and somehow, legally, he'd erased me from the entire deal. That was the moment I realized I didn't own anything, and the man who'd stolen my home shared my blood. Growing up, Jake always made the mess, and I always cleaned it up. That was our rhythm. He'd crash the bike. I'd take the blame. He'd forget Mom's birthday. I'd buy the card and sign both our names. I was the fixer, the safe one. That's who I had to be. Our parents didn't call it favoritism. They called it support. "He just needs more time," Mom would say, usually while paying off his latest screw-up. "He's got potential," Dad added once, as Jake packed his 3rd duffel bag to move in with another girl he couldn't afford. I kept quiet. I always did. Because I thought families are supposed to protect each other, even when it hurts. After my divorce, I moved into a tiny 1-bedroom apartment over a laundromat. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I gave up nights out, sold my car for something older but paid off, and picked up freelance tax work in addition to my full-time accounting job. Every dollar I saved went into one folder, home. That folder became sacred. It meant control, safety. Roots. Jake used to joke about it. "You're always chasing safety, Jules. One day you'll realize life's not a spreadsheet." I smiled when he said that, but deep down, I hated that he couldn't understand why I needed that folder more than anything else. Then came the offer, his big idea, the house he'd flip, the partnership. I didn't tell anyone when I signed the co-loan. I told myself it was temporary, just paperwork. When the loan was approved and the LLC was formed, J&J Properties, Jake called it, I let myself believe we were building something. The first time I saw the house on Google Maps, I cried. It wasn't even finished, but it was real. A white colonial with a crooked mailbox. The kind of house you slow down to stare at when you drive through a nice neighborhood, thinking, someday. That night, I printed the image and pinned it above my bed. I remember telling myself, this is the start of something better. Jake sent photos every few weeks, sometimes just a wall painted or a bathroom tile installed. He even sent a video once, walking through the kitchen saying, "This is where you'll have your coffee, sis." I watched that clip 100 times, but things started slipping. At first it was small. His updates became less frequent. He stopped picking up my calls, said he was swamped. Then I noticed a withdrawal from our shared project account I didn't authorize, $3,200 labeled miscellaneous expenses. When I asked, he brushed it off. Materials, nothing shady. You want receipts? I said no. I wanted to believe him, but that old ache, the one I used to get as a kid when I'd cover for him and lie to our parents, came crawling back. Still, I held on, because everything I'd worked for was tied up in that house, because admitting something was wrong meant admitting I'd failed. Again. because I was tired of being the girl who loses things. After all, it wasn't just a house, it was my future. And I didn't want to see the cracks. Then came the morning I woke up to an email from the bank. A payment had bounced. I checked the loan account. It was empty. I called Jake 6 times that day. No answer. On the 7th, he texted, "Relax. I'll fix it." He didn't. That week, I requested the property records from the county clerk's office. I thought I'd find something simple. A missing document, a title delay, something boring. Instead, I found my name wasn't listed as an owner. Not anymore. The house, the LLC, the title, everything had been shifted, restructured, reassigned, quietly, legally, strategically, and I had signed it all away. I didn't remember doing that. I would have remembered. But there it was. 3 documents with my signature. Only one problem. I never saw those papers before in my life. And I work in finance. I know what I sign. The signatures looked right. The loops, the slant. But they weren't mine. Jake had forged them, and by the time I figured it out, the house was already sold. He didn't just take my dream. He took my identity. The first real itch came when I noticed Jake had started using a new phone. He didn't announce it, didn't mention an upgrade, just suddenly had a different case, a new number I hadn't seen before. He used to send messages at all hours, photos of the house, quick updates, stupid memes. Then, almost overnight, he went silent. I'd text, and the little delivered checkmark would sit there unanswered for hours. Then, days. He'd eventually reply, always with the same energy. "Been slammed. Stuff at the site is insane. Just tired, Jules. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I'd known Jake my entire life. I knew his rhythms, his excuses, the way his voice tightened when he was hiding something. And now, everything felt off. He stopped talking about the house. When I brought it up, he changed the subject. Once, I asked for updated photos. He replied, "Oh, it's still a mess. You'll see when it's ready." Another time, he said, "Trust the process. You've got to stop micromanaging." That one stung, because I wasn't micromanaging. I was scared, and he knew it. The money was still disappearing from our shared account, withdrawals with no explanation. I started tracking every cent, creating spreadsheets, matching charges to dates. I found purchases from suppliers we never talked about. Charges in cities I knew he hadn't visited. $900 at a landscaping company when the yard hadn't even been touched. When I brought it up, he snapped, told me I was being paranoid, said, "This is why I didn't want to partner with family. You don't trust me." He was right. I didn't trust him anymore. But that didn't stop the guilt from eating me alive. Because when you grow up in a family like mine, confrontation isn't just discouraged, it's punished. I didn't get raised to speak up. I got raised to hold it in, swallow the discomfort, and keep the peace. Jake could burn the whole house down, and somehow it would be my job to bring the hose and say sorry for the smoke. But I couldn't ignore what I was seeing. One night, I opened the folder I'd started for our project, labeled J&J House, and stared at the scanned forms. Loan applications, bank authorizations, the LLC setup. That's when I noticed something, a transfer form dated 2 months after we signed the original agreement, listing Jake as sole manager of the LLC. And next to it, a typed note that read, "Confirmed per verbal agreement with Julia." I had never given that agreement, and that note wasn't my writing. It felt like standing on a frozen lake, hearing the first crack beneath your feet. I called the bank the next day, asked to speak with the mortgage officer who'd helped process our loan, I didn't say much, just told him I needed clarification on the account setup. He sounded hesitant. Said I should speak to the account lead, Jake. That's when my stomach dropped. He's the lead? Of course, the man said. He submitted the updated LLC docs. Your name isn't on the most recent paperwork. I couldn't breathe. What about the loan? I asked. Oh, you're still a co-signer on the loan, he said, just not on the property. It took me a few seconds to understand what that meant. Jake had removed me from ownership, but kept me tied to the debt. I was liable if anything went wrong. I didn't own the house, but I still owed for it. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice in my head. It's just a formality. You're part of this. Trust me. Over and over, like a scratched CD. And then I remembered something small, something I almost brushed off at the time. A month earlier, I saw a copy of a title form sitting on Jake's passenger seat when I got into his truck. I glanced at it, saw the house address, my name printed near the top. He saw me looking and quickly covered it with a jacket. Nothing important, he said. Just duplicate paperwork. Now I knew what it really was. A forgery, or worse. A removal document I'd never seen. Something he didn't want me reading because he knew I'd never agree. I started digging quietly. I reviewed the county's public land records portal. Found multiple transactions associated with the house. Not just sales inquiries, but ownership transfers, LLC amendments, secondary loan filings. Jake had used the property as collateral for a private lender loan, something he never disclosed. The documents listed his name alone. The deeper I looked, the more dirt surfaced. But what scared me most wasn't the deception. It was how carefully it was all done. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. And I was the plan. I was the person he needed to make it look legitimate, to get the loan, to give the deal credibility, to sign where he couldn't. And once he got everything approved, once the contracts were sealed, he erased me. It wasn't just about the house. It was about control, about ownership, about erasing the one person in the family who never asked for anything, until she finally did. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't the first time Jake had used me. It was just the first time he made sure I couldn't fix it. The day I saw the notary stamp on the transfer papers was the day something in me cracked. It was official, clean, legal looking. The ink wasn't smudged. The signature was smooth, practiced, mine, but not mine. I stared at it for an hour, willing it to change, trying to convince myself there had to be some mistake, some oversight, some file mix-up. But the more I looked, the more it became clear. The only mistake was me. I let him in. I let him use me, and he knew exactly how far he could go. I called the notary office listed on the document. A woman answered. I gave her the ID number from the seal, the name of the notary, and asked if they had a record of witnessing my signature on that date. She said, that was remote, done via video call. I paused. There was no video call, I told her. She hesitated. Well, the form was submitted as remote witnessed. If that wasn't you, then it was fraud. I asked her if she had the recording. Remote notarizations are supposed to be logged, recorded, verified. She hesitated again. There was a file, she said, but it's corrupted. The video won't play. That's when it hit me. Jake must have used an old photo of my ID, maybe from the time I helped him apply for a car loan. He had access. He knew my info. He probably even guessed the security questions. And if the notary didn't follow proper protocol, or worse, if he used someone shady, no one would notice. It wasn't just fraud. It was premeditated, professional. And I was the mark. And I was looking at the proof. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the printout in front of me like it might spontaneously combust. That was the moment my world stopped being a little off and officially became upside down. Every conversation with Jake started replaying in my head, like watching an old tape and catching details you missed the first time. He had been preparing this for months, maybe longer. Each delay, each excuse, each half answer. It was never about the house. It was about how long he could keep me from asking the wrong questions. And the worst part, I didn't want to believe it even now. I still wanted to think there was some other explanation. Because what kind of brother steals from his own sister and makes her pay for it? What kind of man lies to your face while spending your savings behind your back? But the evidence didn't care how much it hurt. It just sat there, cold, unmoving, honest in a way Jake never was. I opened a new spreadsheet. This one was different. Not about loan payments or budgets. It was a timeline, every date he asked me to sign something. Every time a new document was filed, the day the house was purchased, the day the LLC was amended, the day ownership was transferred, the day it was sold. Each move lined up, every signature, every lie. Piece by piece, I watched the narrative fall into place, like a crime novel I never agreed to star in. I found emails from the bank I hadn't remembered receiving. Turns out, they'd been redirected to a joint project account Jake had control of. He had marked them handled. He was good. I'll give him that. Too good. Then I found a text from a month before the sale. He had sent a photo of the living room, brand new floors, fresh paint, a chandelier. Beneath it, he wrote, soon. I thought he meant soon I'd move in. Now I realized he meant soon it would be gone. That night, I sat in the dark, laptop glowing in my lap, trying to decide what scared me more, what Jake had done, or how long I let it happen. The house wasn't just brick and wood. It was every skipped dinner, every late night with my calculator, every time I told myself I didn't need help from anyone. It was my reward for not falling apart after the divorce, and now it was gone. I told myself I'd confront him the next day, that I'd show him the files, the notary stamps, the transfer records, that I'd make him explain it to my face. But I never got that chance, because when I woke up the next morning, my phone had 23 unread messages, all from my mother. The first one said, "Call me now." The rest? Not about the house, not about Jake. They were about me. Jake had gotten ahead of it. He told them I was having a breakdown, that I was paranoid, accusing him of insane things, that I was threatening legal action over misunderstandings. I hadn't even spoken to him yet, and already the family was circling the wagons, but not around me. When I finally got her on the phone, my mother didn't even ask what was going on. She just sighed and said, "Why are you turning this into a war?" I asked her if she knew the house was sold. She paused. Then she said, "He told us it was always his." I couldn't believe it. I told her about the loan, about the forgery, about the fact I still owed thousands and legally owned nothing. Her response was so soft, I barely heard it. "But you've always been the stable one. He needs help. You don't." There it was, my whole life, boiled down to one sentence. He needs help. I don't, so I get used, and he gets rescued again. That's when I realized this wasn't just Jake's betrayal. It was everyone's. The family that taught me to forgive, to sacrifice, to support. No matter what. But the moment I needed something, silence. They believed his version of me faster than they'd ever listened to the real one. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about being erased, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Not again. After that call with my mother, I didn't scream, I didn't fight, I didn't send Jake a single message. I went quiet. And when someone like me goes quiet, it means something's coming. I stopped asking questions, stopped pushing. I became what Jake always assumed I was. The good little sister who backed down when things got hard. The one who put her head down and moved on. But I wasn't done. I was studying him. For the first time in my life. I wasn't cleaning up his mess. I was watching it form in real time. And I needed to know how deep it went. There's a kind of silence that's louder than shouting. That's where I lived for the next few weeks. I smiled when my parents called, pretended to let things go. I told them they were right, that maybe I overreacted, but I was building something behind the scenes. I started with a lawyer, not a cheap one, a real estate litigator who'd handled fraud, forgery, breach of fiduciary duty, all of it. When I first sat down in his office, he barely blinked as I laid out the situation. It wasn't the first time he'd seen someone like Jake. By the end of the meeting, he looked me in the eye and said, "If you want to fight, we can win, but you need to stay quiet until we're ready." So that's what I did. I collected everything, the emails, transaction histories, copies of signatures, texts, voicemails. I dug through every digital drawer I had. I even drove to the house again, the one Jake sold without telling me, and sat outside for an hour, watching the new owners play with their kids in the front yard. Not because I wanted it back. I just needed to remember what was stolen from me. Not the bricks, not the porch swing, but the belief that I was safe like Jake didn't know I was coming for him. He thought it was over, and he played his part well. A week after my mother's call, he sent me a voice message, upbeat as ever. "Hey Jules, been thinking about how we left things. I hate this tension between us. Let's get dinner and clear the air. Family first, right?" It was almost funny. He wanted peace, not justice. Peace meant no lawsuit. Peace meant no discovery process. No judge reviewing signatures. Peace meant I disappeared, and he moved on with the profit. I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the next 10 days tracing every document with my name on it. The lawyer had contacts in title agencies, loan offices, even 2 notaries willing to confirm they'd never met me in person. We started building a case, piece by piece. Meanwhile, I let Jake believe I was licking my wounds. He posted a photo on Instagram, him with a cocktail, captioned "New Beginnings." The comments were full of praise. Friends saying, "Proud of you, and you deserve this." I stared at the screen, thinking, if only they knew what he'd done to get there. But I didn't reply. I didn't try to convince anyone, because that's the thing about telling the truth. It only works when the people listening actually want to hear it, and no one in our family wanted to hear mine. So I stopped trying. Jake kept calling, sent flowers once, said he missed the old us. The old us was dead. The new me, she was preparing to take everything back and burn the rest if she had to. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from realizing your whole identity was built around being useful. And once you stop being useful, or worse, once you ask for something, the people who say they love you suddenly don't have time for your version of the story. I learned that the hard way, but that pain, I held it. I used it because I knew the storm was coming, and I wanted to be the one driving it. The lawyer filed the first motion 2 weeks after our initial meeting, a quiet, precise strike, a demand for records, a challenge to the title transfer, a notice of suspected forgery. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it was the beginning of the end. We didn't tell Jake right away. We let the paperwork go out first, mailed directly to his new condo address, certified. I pictured him opening the envelope, expecting a bank statement or some boring update, and instead finding a legal notice with my name at the top. No warning, no conversation, just the beginning of a war he thought I was too soft to start. He tried to call me that night. I let it ring. Then he texted. All it said was, "What the hell is this?" I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. He called again, left a voicemail, angry, nervous, accused me of betrayal. I didn't reply, because the time for talking was over. He made his moves in the dark. Now it was my turn, and I wasn't coming to make peace. I was coming to take back everything he stole. I always thought the day I finally confronted Jake would be loud, screaming, accusations, fists on tables, years of resentment pouring out like floodwater. But the moment it happened, everything went quiet. The storm wasn't outside. It was under my skin. It started with a deposition. Jake was ordered to appear for questioning under oath, part of the civil case. His lawyer tried to delay it, claimed scheduling issues, claimed Jake was emotionally distressed, but the court didn't care. The date was set. I remember sitting in that gray room across from him, just a long table between us, a court reporter typing in the corner, my lawyer to my left. Jake looked older, less polished. There was a twitch in his jaw I hadn't seen before. The mask didn't quite fit anymore. He didn't meet my eyes when he walked in. Didn't say my name. Just sat down like a man preparing for battle. Except he didn't know the evidence had already buried him. The deposition lasted 4 hours. It started soft. Basic questions about the house, the loan, the LLC. Jake stuck to his lines, said everything was mutually agreed upon, said he believed in good faith, that I had stepped away from the project voluntarily. But then we brought out the documents, the notary logs, the bank account changes, the signature comparisons. My lawyer slid one across the table and asked, "Can you confirm this is your sister's signature?" Jake squinted, hesitated, then said, "It looks like hers." "But it's not." He shrugged. "If it's on the form, I assumed it was hers." "And who filed this form?" Silence. My lawyer leaned in. "We've confirmed through notary verification that this signature was submitted without Julia's physical or digital presence. We have sworn statements from the witnesses on file." "Can you explain that?" Jake looked directly at me then, for the first time. And I'll never forget the expression on his face. Not regret, not shame, just calculation, like he was trying to figure out how much he could still salvage. But the walls were already collapsing. We presented the second mortgage filing, the one he secured using the house as collateral, forging my name on the consent form. Then the vendor invoices from suppliers I'd never heard of. Then the text messages we'd subpoenaed from his contractor, who'd confirmed Jake told him I was just a name on paper. Every few minutes, Jake shifted in his seat, wiped sweat from his forehead. His lawyer kept trying to object, but there was nothing to object to. These were his documents, his trail. It wasn't about proving intent anymore. It was about exposure. We reached the point where even he couldn't deny it. He finally admitted to some clerical errors, said things were rushed, said I was emotional at the time, so he thought it was better to take initiative. That's when I realized something awful. He still didn't believe he'd done anything wrong. To him, this wasn't theft. It was strategy. He saw me not as a person, but as leverage, a credit score, a tool. He didn't hate me. He just didn't care about me. And in some ways, that was worse. When the deposition ended, we walked out without a word. No apology. No attempt to explain. Just the slow unraveling of someone who finally understood they couldn't charm their way out. 3 days later, the call came. My lawyer said Jake had offered a settlement. He was willing to sign back the title on another property he hadn't sold yet. An old duplex he was sitting on. In exchange, I'd drop the forgery charge and walk away from the lawsuit. I said no, because it was never just about the house. It was about being heard, about being seen, about forcing him to face the damage, even if he never apologized for it. I wanted the court to see the truth, to put it in writing, because if my family wouldn't believe me, the judge would. And that mattered. The trial date was set. Jake stopped calling. My parents stopped asking questions. I became the villain in a story they didn't want to rewrite. In their eyes, I was being cruel, unforgiving, vindictive. But I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for accountability. You can't build peace on silence. You can't heal when the wound is still open. I'd spent most of my life swallowing things for other people's comfort. This time, I chose myself. And even though it hurt like hell, even though I cried more nights than I'll ever admit, I kept going. Because I wasn't just fighting for the house, I was fighting for the version of me that never got to speak. And for the first time, someone was listening. The first day of trial felt colder than it should have. Not the weather, the silence. No one from my family came, not even to sit in the back. The courtroom wasn't packed, just a few people waiting for other cases, the clerk, the bailiff. My attorney and I sat on one side of the room, Jake and his lawyer on the other. Two siblings, now two parties on opposing sides of a courtroom, separated by paper, lies, and blood. When the judge walked in, everything slowed. For the first few minutes, I didn't hear anything, just the sound of my own breath. Then the documents started appearing. Evidence packets, notarized forms, screenshots. I knew every page by heart. We'd rehearsed for weeks. But seeing them displayed under the court's lights made them feel heavier. And then came the testimony. I sat behind a microphone, hands folded, voice steady. I spoke about the co-loan, about the promise Jake made, about the texts, the fake signatures, the quiet way he folded me out of something I had built from the ground up. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I told the truth like it was math. Clean, logical, undeniable. And Jake, he lied again. Said I'd given him verbal permission. Said I was unstable after my divorce and wanted nothing to do with the property. Claimed I was trying to ruin his life because I was jealous of his success. Even his lawyer winced at that last part. I kept my eyes on the judge because there was nothing Jake could say now that I hadn't already heard from my family. But now, finally, someone was listening who didn't love him more than the truth. The judge asked one question. Do you have any documentation that proves Ms. Fields agreed to be removed from the property? Jake paused, said no. The judge nodded, wrote something down, and just like that, the damage was done. After court adjourned, Jake followed me into the hallway. He didn't yell. He whispered, said, "You ruined everything." Then he walked past me like I was a stranger. But I didn't follow, because I wasn't the one who ruined anything. He did, and I just stopped pretending it didn't happen. The final decision came 3 weeks later. The judge ruled in my favor. full restitution of all forged transactions, penalties assessed. Ownership of the house officially reassigned back to me. Jake was ordered to pay legal fees or have his remaining assets seized and sold. I stared at the judgment for a long time. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like cleaning up after a fire. There's no trophy for surviving betrayal. No applause. Just a few signatures and a cold drive home. And the silence that follows. That was the hardest part. My phone stayed quiet. No calls from my parents, not even after the ruling was made public. A week later, I tried. I texted my mom. I told her the judge had ruled that everything Jake did had been proven, that it wasn't a misunderstanding, that it wasn't in my head. She replied 4 hours later, a single sentence. "You didn't have to take it this far." That was the last message I got. I thought I'd feel free after the ruling. Instead, I felt empty. I got the house back, but it didn't look the same anymore. The new owners had moved out, and the place was quiet. Furniture gone, walls echoing. I walked through it slowly, hand on the banister, the floor creaking under me. Everything looked smaller, colder. I stood in the kitchen where Jake had once promised I'd drink my morning coffee. That memory hurt more than anything else, because he meant it when he said it, or maybe he didn't. I'll never really know. I opened the cabinets, still smelled like lemon cleaner, still held the shape of the life I'd imagined, but the version of me who believed in that dream was gone, and she wasn't coming back. So I started over. I repainted the walls, tore down the porch swing, replaced every doorknob, every light switch, every lock, not out of anger, but because I needed to scrub every trace of him out of my space. He took something from me I'll never get back. Not just the money, not just the trust, but the version of family I used to believe in. And now I live alone in a house I fought for. Not because I wanted to, but because no one else would fight for me. It's been 3 years. Most of the rooms are quiet now. There's a dullness to the days that's hard to describe. I go to work, I come home, I make dinner for one. Some nights, I turn the TV on just for noise. Other nights, I just sit in the kitchen, staring at nothing, wondering how long I've been frozen like that. The house is fully mine. Paid off. Clean title. The walls are warm now, pale blue instead of the cold gray they used to be. There's a rug in the living room I saved for a ridiculous indulgence. I still wear the same winter coat I've had for 8 years, but I spent $400 on a rug I saw in a magazine. I guess it was something I could control. Control. That's the word that still haunts me, because for a long time I thought that was the goal. Having control meant being safe. But it turns out you can play everything right, and life will still find a way to gut you. You can be careful, responsible, quiet, and still get robbed by the person who used to call you sis with a laugh in his throat. People sometimes ask why I live alone. They don't ask directly, but it's there in the way they pause, tilt their heads when I say, "It's just me." I usually just say, I like the quiet, but the truth is, I don't trust easily anymore. That part of me, the part that believed love and blood were stronger than betrayal, died the moment my mother texted me, "You didn't have to take it this far." I reread that message sometimes. It's still in my phone, buried in a thread I never responded to. I don't delete it. I don't know why. Maybe it reminds me that I wasn't imagining it, that they really did choose silence. After the judgment came down, Jake disappeared from the family group chat. Not that I was in it. I was removed months before I heard from a cousin that he moved out of state, trying to start fresh, working with some investor friends. He always lands somewhere soft. And me, I stayed, not because I had to, but because I needed to see what happened when you finally stop running and let yourself sit with the ruin. Because that's what betrayal leaves behind. Not just scars, but spaces, hollow rooms where trust used to live. Echoes of conversations you thought were sacred. And sometimes, even years later, a noise in the night will sound like a door opening, and you'll flinch. Not because you're scared someone's coming in, but because a part of you still wants it to be them. Even after everything. Even after the lies. Even after they watched you fall and called it your fault. I started therapy, quietly, didn't tell anyone. I didn't go to get better. I went because I needed someone to look me in the eye and say, yes, that really happened, and no, you're not crazy. The first few sessions, I didn't say much, just sat there and explained the facts. Like I was still in court, but eventually the details started to crack. I stopped talking about signatures and started talking about my childhood. About how being the stable one doesn't mean being safe. It means being used over and over, because no one thinks you'll break. And when you finally do, they punish you for the sound it makes. There's a box in my closet I still haven't opened. Inside are the old forms from the case. Copies of the forged signatures, the first photo Jake sent me of the house. A letter I wrote, but never sent to my mother. Folded 4 times and stained with coffee. Sometimes I think about burning it. Other times, I think it's the only proof I ever existed in that version of our family. The only time I stopped being useful and started being real. I don't date much. People ask why. I tell them I'm busy, that I'm focused on my career, that I like my independence, all true. But also, I can't afford to be fooled again, not by someone who smiles and says the right thing, not by anyone who calls me safe like it's a compliment. I used to think safety was the goal. Now I know. It was the bait. The house is beautiful now. I made it mine. Room by room, paintbrush by paintbrush, I planted a lilac bush out back that reminds me of the ones outside our childhood home. They haven't bloomed yet, but I watch them anyway. Something about waiting for something to grow, even if it never does, still feels like hope, or maybe just muscle memory. There are days when I'm okay, and days when I walk through the house and think, this is what survival looks like. Not perfect, not full of joy, but quiet and real and mine. If I'm being honest, I don't know who I'm writing this to. Maybe to no one. Maybe to someone who's been here too. Maybe just to myself. Because saying it out loud still feels too dangerous. There are things you can only say when you know no one will answer. That's what this is. Not a cry for help. Not revenge. Not closure. Just the truth, said plainly. So I don't drown in it. I've spent years trying to be the kind of person who doesn't break. The kind of person who smiles through betrayal, who forgives even when no one asks, who keeps showing up, no matter how many times they're pushed aside. But something about what Jake did, it snapped a wire inside me I didn't even know was there. Not just because of the money, or the legal battle, or even the house, but because of what it revealed. That the love I thought was unconditional had terms all along. That being the reliable one didn't make me respected. It just made me easy to ignore. That the moment I needed something, really needed something, the people I loved most in this world turned away, like I was a stranger with a clipboard. I remember every word they said. Don't make this a bigger deal than it is. He's your brother. Can't you let it go? You've always been the strong one. As if strength meant silence, as if silence meant peace. I stayed quiet my whole life for their comfort, but this thing Jake did, it stripped away the illusion. And once you see it for what it is, you can't unsee it. That's what this letter is. Not revenge, not explanation, just a record of what it cost. Because the truth is, I didn't just lose a house. I lost the story I'd spent my whole life believing. That family protects you. That being good, being patient, being generous means you'll be safe in the end. It doesn't. Sometimes the people you'd give a kidney to will hand you the knife instead. And when they do, it won't be with hate. It'll be with a smile, a joke, a casual shrug like you're overreacting. That's the part no one tells you. That betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. And it sounds like someone you've loved your entire life. I think about Jake more than I want to admit. Not because I miss him, but because part of me still doesn't understand how he did it with such ease. How he looked me in the eyes and lied over and over. How he sat across from me in court like we were strangers. How he watched our parents turn on me and didn't say a word. Sometimes I wonder if it ever hits him late at night. What he did. If he ever thinks about the years we played in the yard together. The birthdays. The inside jokes. If he ever misses me. Or just misses what I did for him. I used to wish for an apology. A real one. Not for the court, not to protect himself. But just human, honest, raw. But now I know it'll never come. Because people like him don't apologize. They rewrite the story until they're the victim. I saw the version of that story in my mother's eyes. The way she flinched when I tried to explain. Like I was making too much noise. Like my pain was embarrassing. She used to call me her calm place. Now she doesn't call it all. And maybe that's what hurts most of all. Not the theft, not the court, but the silence that came after. The way no one ever said, "I'm sorry this happened to you." Not once. And so, this letter. To whoever is reading, if anyone is, not to be pitied, not to be avenged, but just to be heard. Because there's something corrosive about being erased, about living through something devastating, and watching the people you love pretend it's not real, because it's easier than facing the truth. This happened. He stole from me. They let him. I fought back. And now I live in the house I reclaimed. Alone, yes, but on my terms. That matters. I tell this not to reopen the wound, but to prove it existed, because when the world gaslights your grief, you start to doubt the shape of it. You wonder if maybe you're the broken one, if maybe it wasn't that bad, but it was. And saying it out loud is how I remind myself, I'm still here. I lived through it. I did not vanish, was not erased. They left, but I stayed. And that in its own quiet way is a kind of survival. There's a strange moment after survival. It doesn't feel like victory. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like standing in an empty room, surrounded by what you saved, and realizing you're the only one left in it. The house is quiet now, always quiet. I used to crave that silence. Now I know it can be just as deafening as betrayal. Sometimes I hear a car pull into the driveway and my heart skips. For nothing. No one's coming. No one knocks. No one says my name. But memory does. Memory has a key to this place. It lives in the corners. In the floorboards I replaced. In the door frame he leaned on. The day he said, "It's just paperwork." In the kitchen he once called ours. That word doesn't mean what I thought it meant. I don't cry anymore, not because I'm strong, because the tears dried up in court, on paper, under oath. They were replaced by something else. Stillness, a kind of numbness that looks like peace but isn't. It's just survival wearing a mask. I still work the same job, still do other people's taxes. I smile politely when they talk about buying houses, joint investments, family trusts. They don't know what I know. They don't know that sometimes the people you trust most won't stab you in the back. They'll use your hand to sign the knife over to them. There are nights I sit by the window with a cup of tea and ask myself who I am now. Not the sister, not the fixer, not the forgiver. Just the one who didn't fold. Some days that feels like a triumph. Other days it feels like a prison sentence. Because this house, this thing I fought for, it's not what I dreamed. It's just a symbol now, a monument to everything that broke. I've thought about selling it, starting over somewhere else. Somewhere no one knows my name or the court case or the silence that followed, but I haven't. Not yet, because part of me still believes I need to stay, not to hold on to what was, but to prove, if only to myself, that I wasn't erased. People talk about closure like it's a destination. It's not. Closure is a decision, a line you draw in the dirt, and then stand behind it, while the rest of the world forgets you ever existed. I drew that line the day I didn't pick up the phone. It was a Sunday, late. Her name lit up my screen, the name that used to mean home. I let it ring. She left a voicemail I never listened to. I already knew what it said. I could feel it in my bones. An apology, too late, or maybe just a wish to pretend nothing happened. Either way, it didn't matter. Forgiveness isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just another word for surrender. And I'm done surrendering. People think healing is soft, quiet, gentle. Mine was violent, loud in the places no one could hear, full of slammed doors, broken illusions, sleepless nights. And in the end, I wasn't reborn. I was just emptied of hope, of fantasy, of the belief that blood protects. I look in the mirror now and see someone older than she should be, not in wrinkles, in weight, in the things she carries that no one asks about. But I stand every day. I wake up, I keep going, I live. And maybe that's the echo, not of what was lost, but of what survived. She once asked for forgiveness, and I no longer know how to feel. That's not revenge. That's what's left. What would you do in my place? Please write your thoughts in the comments. I will be happy to read them.